Ever been mocked by someone who thought they held all the power? They're about to learn that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. Never underestimate the woman in handcuffs. Subscribe. Your next dose of justice awaits. The rain had just ceased, leaving the city of Brighton Falls glistening under a bruised, twilight sky. In the narrow service alley behind the Grindhouse bar, the air was thick with the smell of damp brick, spilled beer, and impending violence. The neon sign from the bar's rear entrance cast a pulsating, bloody red glow across the scene, painting the faces of the participants in a hellish light. Elara Vance, a 26-year-old woman with a posture that spoke of quiet discipline even in distress, found her back pressed against the cold, wet brick wall. Her dark, military-style cargo pants and fitted black jacket were sleek and functional, but they now did little to protect her from the menace closing in. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, high ponytail that accentuated the sharp lines of her jaw and the defiant set of her mouth. A trickle of blood, from where one of them had roughly grabbed her, traced a path from her temple down her cheek, a stark crimson against her pale skin. But it was her eyes that were the most disconcerting feature. They weren't wide with terror, but narrowed with a cold, analytical fury, like a strategist assessing a battlefield against overwhelming odds. The three young men surrounding her were a portrait of entitled arrogance, their identities swallowed by their matching red and white varsity jackets from the local university. They were the kings of their tiny, inconsequential world. Carter, the ringleader, with his perfectly coiffed hair and a smirk that had never been wiped off his face. Liam, his hulking, monosyllabic shadow, and Jason, the weaselly one who fed off the reflected glory of the others. They had targeted Elara inside the bar for the simple, unforgivable crime of existing in their space and refusing to acknowledge their self-proclaimed superiority. When she had calmly, dismissively, told Carter his pickup line was as original as a tax form, his pride had shattered like cheap glass. He couldn't let it stand, not in front of his crew, not in front of the few onlookers who had filtered out into the alley. Smartphones already raised, their screens glowing like the eyes of nocturnal creatures drawn to a carcass. "You think you're smart?" Carter sneered, his breath fogging in the chilly air, laced with the sour tang of cheap whiskey. Talking back like that. To me, he took a step closer, invading her personal space, trying to use his bulk to intimidate her. Elara didn't flinch. She simply watched him, her gaze steady, which only infuriated him more. "I merely stated a fact," Elara replied, her voice low and even, devoid of the tremor he so desperately wanted to hear. There was no back to it. It was a simple forward-facing observation. Liam chuckled, a low, stupid sound. "She's still doing it, man." This was the core of their rage. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't crying. She was correcting them. To men like them, a woman's calm rationality in the face of their aggression was the ultimate insult, a poison to their fragile masculinity. Carter's face twisted. He pulled a pair of heavy, duty zip tie cuffs from his jacket pocket, the kind used for cheap, cosplay restraint, but strong enough to bite deep into flesh. The sight of them sent a fresh wave of excited murmurs through the small crowd recording the event. This was better than they'd hoped for. A real-life humiliation. "You need to learn some respect," Carter spat, grabbing her wrist. For a fleeting second, Elara's body tensed, every muscle fiber screaming to react, to dislocate his shoulder and drive his nose bone into his brain. Her training, years of it, provided a dozen ways to end this in 3 seconds. But that was her old life. Her new role required a different kind of strength, patience. Enduring this, as degrading as it was a strategic choice. Physical resistance would be messy, public, and would unravel the careful anonymity she had cultivated. So, she let him. She allowed Liam to grab her other arm, and she didn't struggle as Carter pulled the plastic cuff tight around her wrists, the sharp edge digging painfully into the delicate bones. The click of the ratchet was obscenely loud in the alley. "There," Carter said, stepping back to admire his handiwork. He pulled out his own phone, switching to video mode, the camera's eye a black pit of soulless vanity. "Look at you now, so tough, so smart. Let's see how you talk your way out of these." He brought the camera close to her face, capturing the bruise, the blood, the restrained fury in her eyes. "Everyone, say hi to the bitch who forgot her place." Elara's gaze never left his. She didn't look at the camera, only at him, as if memorizing every pore, every flicker of stupid malice in his eyes. "This is a mistake," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, yet it cut through the ambient noise. "What was that?" Carter laughed, leaning in. "I can't hear you from down there," I said. Alara repeated, her voice gaining a fraction of steel. "You have no idea the chain of events you just initiated. This isn't about me anymore. It's about you. And the ruin that is coming for you." Her words, so specific and laden with certainty, gave him a moment's pause. But the adulation from his friends and the virtual audience he imagined was too potent. He scoffed. "Yeah. And what are you going to do? Call your daddy?" A ghost of a smile touched Alara's lips. It was the most terrifying expression any of them had ever seen. "No," she said, "not my daddy." For 20 minutes, they paraded her. They forced her to walk up and down the alley, making snide comments, occasionally giving her a shove, all while their phones and those of the onlookers documented every second of her humiliation. The videos were already being uploaded, shared, commented on with laughing emojis and messages of "get wrecked." They were the stars of their own sick little drama, completely unaware they were extras in a play whose final act was written by the woman they had handcuffed. Finally, growing bored with her lack of reaction, Carter gave her one last, hard shove towards an overflowing dumpster. "Think about what you've done," he sneered before he Liam, and Jason turned and swaggered out of the alley, high-fiving and laughing, their voices echoing into the night. The onlookers, their spectacle over, quickly dispersed, already editing their clips for maximum social media impact. The moment they were gone, the energy around Alara shifted. The passive prisoner was gone, replaced by an operative assessing her situation. She scanned the alley, her eyes quickly landing on a jagged piece of metal protruding from the dumpster's rusted frame. With practiced, efficient movements, she turned her back to it, sawed the plastic cuff against the sharp edge, and in less than 30 seconds, her hands were free. She didn't rub her raw wrists. She didn't collapse in a heap of tears. She reached into a hidden, sealed pocket inside her jacket and retrieved a phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It was a sleek black, satellite-enabled device, ruggedized and devoid of any brand markings, with a small, thumbprint-activated biometric sensor on the side. She pressed her thumb to the sensor. The screen glowed to life, displaying a single stark icon, a stylized eagle set against a pentagonal shape. She tapped it. The call connected instantly without a single ring. A calm, professional male voice answered. "Verification. Vance Alara. Sierra 799er Tango Zulu," she said, her voice now crisp, authoritative, and devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of someone used to giving orders that were followed without question. There was a brief pause, the sound of rapid typing on the other end. "Verified. Status. Colonel Vance." The title hung in the air, a stark contrast to the bitch she'd been called moments before. Colonel Alara Vance was not just a Pentagon officer. She was the deputy director of the Joint Non-Terrestrial Threat Analysis Group, a department so classified its budget was buried in 3 different places and its existence denied at the highest levels of government. Her work involved threats that most of the Pentagon didn't even know existed. "I have been the subject of a forcible restraint and aggravated assault by 3 hostiles," she reported, her tone as dry as a mission debrief. "The incident has been recorded and is being disseminated on open-source social media platforms. This constitutes a critical breach of my operational security and a direct threat to ongoing, top-priority national security projects." The hostiles are identified as Carter Jones, Liam Broderick, and Jason Miller, all students at Brighton University. Their current location is likely en route to a campus area residence. "I am invoking Protocol Aegis. I repeat, Protocol Aegis is authorized. Scorch the earth." There was another, longer pause on the line. Protocol Aegis was not invoked lightly. It was a contingency for when a key asset was compromised in a public, messy way. It was designed not just to neutralize a threat, but to utterly erase it from existence and bury the truth under a mountain of plausible deniability. "Understood, Colonel," the voice came back, now laced with a new gravity. "Aegis is live. The hounds are being unleashed. ETA to your position for extraction is 90 seconds. Please proceed to the rally point." Alara ended the call. She looked towards the mouth of the alley where a sleek, black SUV with tinted windows had just glided to a silent halt. It hadn't been there before. It was her ride, her team. As she walked towards it, her posture straight, The handcuff marks on her wrists like badges of a battle that was only just beginning. The first digital tendrils of the Pentagon's wrath were already snaking their way into the world of Carter, Liam, and Jason. For the bullies, the night was still a victory celebration. They posted their videos, bragged to their friends online, and cracked open beers in Carter's off-campus apartment, reveling in their perceived dominance. The videos were gaining traction, the comments a mix of condemnation and the very approval they craved. They felt untouchable. The unraveling began subtly at first. At 11:37 p.m. Carter's phone died, not a low battery, but a complete permanent brick. The screen went black and would never light again. A minute later, Liam's and Jason's did the same. They shrugged it off as a weird coincidence, a minor annoyance. Then the internet in the apartment cut out. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Cursing, Carter went to the window to see if it was a building-wide outage. It wasn't. The rest of the street was lit up like a Christmas tree. That's when they heard the sirens. Not just police sirens, but a chorus of them, growing rapidly closer. Red and blue lights soon painted the interior of the dark apartment in frantic strokes. "What the hell?" Jason whispered, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach. The door to the apartment exploded inwards, splintering off its hinges. It wasn't the local police who stormed in. It was a SWAT team clad in black armor, their rifles pointed, their voices barking command. Terrified and confused, the three boys were forced to the floor, hands zipped, tied behind their backs. A cruel irony lost on them in their panic. They were dragged out of the apartment in front of all their neighbors and thrown into the back of separate, unmarked vans. This, however, was just the prelude. The local police had been bypassed entirely. The men in the vans were not cops. They were federal agents from an alphabet soup of agencies they'd only seen in movies. The interrogation rooms they were taken to were sterile, soundproofed, and devoid of any identifying marks. The questions were not about the assault in the alley. They were about things they couldn't comprehend. "Who is your handler?" A stone-faced man in a suit asked Carter. "Handler? What are you talking about?" "We just got into a fight with some girl. The individual you assaulted is a key asset in a national security operation. Your attempt to compromise her cover was sophisticated. We know you're working for a foreign entity. Tell us which one, and this will go easier for you." The Carter's mind reeled. National security, foreign entity. It was insane. It was a girl in a bar. He started to cry, the bravado completely gone, replaced by the raw terror of a child caught in a machine he didn't understand. Meanwhile, the digital, scorched earth policy was in full effect. Every trace of the videos from the alley was systematically erased from the internet. Not just deleted, but purged. Servers were accessed, backups were wiped, and the accounts of everyone who had shared the video were suspended for violations of terms of service related to coordinated inauthentic behavior and national security risks. It was as if the incident had never happened, but the true ruin was just beginning. By morning, their families were being investigated by the IRS. Their parents, small business owners, and mid-level managers found their accounts frozen, their professional licenses under review. Leaks, expertly crafted and completely false, began to appear on obscure but credible-looking financial crime blogs, linking their families to international money laundering schemes and cyber terrorism. Their university expelled them, citing a clause about conduct unbecoming that threatened the institution's federal funding. Their friends, terrified of being associated with traitors, disowned them completely. In less than 72 hours, Carter, Liam, and Jason were no longer college jocks. They were pariahs, their lives and the lives of their families systematically dismantled. They sat in their separate, bleak holding cells, charged not with assault, but with sedition and conspiring to aid a foreign adversary, charges that carried life sentences. They had thought they were powerful, handcuffing a woman in an alley. They had no concept of real power, the kind that could erase you from existence with a single, calm phone call. A week later, Carter sat on the thin, hard mattress in his cell, a hollowed-out shell of the arrogant young man he had been. He hadn't seen sunlight. His lawyer, a harried public defender, had told him the evidence was overwhelming, though he couldn't see any of it as it was all classified. He was told to plead guilty for a lesser sentence of 50 years. He was broken. The cell door clicked open. A guard gestured for him to stand. "You have a visitor." He was led to a private visitation room. Not the general one with plexiglass, but a small concrete room with a single table and 2 chairs. Seated in one chair was Alara Vance. She looked immaculate. She wore a sharp, dark pantsuit, her hair still in that severe ponytail. But the bruise on her face was gone. She looked calm, composed, and utterly in control. In front of her on the table was a thin, sealed manila envelope. Carter flinched as the door locked behind him. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Sit down, Mr. Jones," Alara said, her voice not loud but filling the small space. He shuffled to the chair and sat, his shoulders slumped. "Look at me," she commanded. He forced his eyes upward. The cold, analytical gaze was still there, but now he understood what it meant. It was the gaze of a predator, and he was the prey that had foolishly nipped at its heels. "I imagine you're confused," she began. "You think this is a monstrous overreaction, a simple bar fight blown out of proportion by a vengeful woman with connections." He said nothing, his silence an admission. "It's not," she said flatly. "The world you lived in, the world of varsity jackets and social media clout and thinking you could put your hands on anyone who slighted you, that was a fantasy. This," she gestured around the sterile room, "is the reality. The real world operates on levers of power you can't even conceive of. You pulled one of those levers when you put those cuffs on me. You just didn't know it was connected to a demolition charge." She slid the manila envelope across the table. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. By signing it, you admit your guilt to the assault charge, a misdemeanor. You will serve 1 year of probation. The federal charges will disappear. Your family's assets will be unfrozen. The digital evidence against them will vanish. Your lives will, for the most part, return to normal." A flicker of desperate hope ignited in Carter's eyes. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because the alternative is you and your friends becoming permanent guests of the federal government, and your families living in destitution. The story that will be told is that you were the victims of a sophisticated identity theft and fraud ring that framed you. A tragic misunderstanding. The real story, me, the Pentagon protocol aegis, will never be spoken of. Not by you, not by your friends, not by your families. If a single whisper of the truth ever emerges, this entire apparatus will come down on you again. And next time, there will be no visitation. There will be no envelope. You will simply cease to be. Do you understand the deal?" Carter understood. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. It was mercy, but a mercy so absolute and terrifying it felt like a fresh condemnation. He was being spared, but only so he could live every day of the rest of his life knowing how small and fragile he truly was. He had tried to handcuff a woman, and in return, she had handcuffed his entire future to her silence. He nodded, his hand trembling as he picked up the pen offered from her side of the table. Alara watched him sign, her expression unchanging. She had broken them without throwing a single punch. She had ended their lives as they knew them, not with bullets, but with bureaucracy and the terrifying, invisible power of the state. As she stood to leave, the envelope secured, she gave him one last, lingering look. "The handcuffs you used were plastic," she said, her voice a whisper of finality. "Mine are made of your future. Choose wisely how you live it." She exited the room, leaving Carter alone with the crushing weight of his second chance, a gift that felt more like a life sentence than the 50 years in prison ever could. The bullies were gone. All that remained were 3 broken boys who would forever glance over their shoulders, terrified of the shadows, knowing that in the real world, the quiet ones were the most dangerous of all.